Hello, I'm John Reed, employer liaison with Career Opportunities and the facilitator of this podcast. Welcome to Before You Cross That Bridge, a podcast series focusing on helping young adults find a job and or a career on Cape Cod.
Nick Boses is sales and project manager for Bayside Building on Cape Cod. Nick has been with the company for 5 years. Before joining Bayside Building, he had spent 5 summers working in various jobs within the building industry. These jobs helped him identify his strengths, his weaknesses, his likes, his dislikes, and provided a pathway to his current position at Bayside Building. So, Nick, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Sean.
So I noticed, first of all, that you had graduated Sloan School of Business at the College of Charleston, studying business and real estate. Now, I was just curious, what with all the academia we boast about here in New England, what brought you to Charleston?
So Charleston came on the radar. I had a couple friends that were a couple years older than me and went down to the college. So I was all over the place senior year, not sure where I wanted to go, or junior year, I guess, looking up and down the East Coast for the most part. At the end of the day, a lot of it had to do with money. Northeast schools are, priced absurdly high at this point.
I hear
Charleston, on the other hand, out of state was less than half the price of anything I could get into up in the Northeast. But beyond the cost, I just fell in love with the city. As soon as I spent 1 weekend there. If anybody's ever been there, they typically have really nice things to say. It's right on the water. Growing up on Cape Cod, I didn't want to be far from the water.
Sure.
I wanted a school that was a good size. It's got 10,000 kids. It's right in the city. The campus is built in as part of the skyline that makes up Charleston. So it was just a perfect fit for me, and I'm glad I went there.
Well, that's great. Whereabouts on the Cape did you grow up?
I grew up right in Barnstable, Centerville, right by, Four Seas Ice Cream is the biggest landmark around us. So,
sure. Lucky you.
Yep. Born and raised, went to Barnstable High School, and then left the Northeast for 4 years and went down to Charleston.
Okay. So I noticed that, first of all, Bayside is known for wonderful subdivisions, and I see Catuit Meadows and Wacoit Meadows going up. But it sounds like you wear a lot of hats because you're estimating, you're dealing with subcontractors, project management. So considering you're wearing a lot of hats, are you wearing a hard hat at times?
No, never wearing a hard hat, although I guess OSHA says you're supposed to, but none of us ever wear hard hats. But my job does require quite a bit. I mean, as far as Catuit Meadows and Wacoit Meadows, starting there, those are our 2 main subdivisions that we have going. I think one is higher end Wacoit, which is probably 25 houses. Catuit Meadows is our low end, but still very nice houses, about $500,000 a piece, and there's 125 houses in that subdivision. So that takes up majority of my time. I spend my weekends doing model homes, doing the sales work out there, and then I'm in the office during the week, not only doing just the subdivision work, customer relations. You've got the sales going, you're dealing with subcontractors, making sure everybody's where they need to be, when they need to be there. Estimating is another part of it, and that I do estimating for everything from our oceanfront houses to our small Catuit Meadows type houses, and I do all the permitting for all of our work that we do. So I spend a lot of time down at town hall getting the work through. We typically have probably 20 houses or so going at a time.
Do you sleep at all, Nick? That's my biggest question.
No, yeah, it's not that bad. It's just prioritizing your time and making sure you have a life outside of work as well.
Well, naturally, it took you some summer jobs to get there. Could you please tell us a little bit about these summer jobs you had along the way?
Sure. Yeah. So, number one, Bayside has been a part of my life since I was born. My father's the vice president here, and he's worked with Brian Dacey, the owner, since they initially started the company back in the early 80s. So he got me into it at a young age. I think my 8th grade summer, he put me right to work doing concrete foundations. So I spent my whole summer, 8th grade and 9th grade, doing predominantly form work. So dig a hole, you're sitting in a pit in the middle of July and August, carrying 100-pound forms and banging them together, pouring concrete, ripping them apart, and starting over again. So that was definitely something that formulated a good work ethic at a young age for me.
Oh, I would say so.
And then I switched it up from that. I was, sick of doing foundation, so I worked with a painter, and we did, everything that has to do with painting, outside, inside. And that job was monotonous, to be honest with you. Attention to detail. That was probably my least favorite job. So I swapped out of that. On the Cape? Yeah, on the Cape. Still doing a lot of side houses and side work and all that stuff. I followed that up, I think my junior year, I joined a framing crew and framed all summer. So I loved that job. That was fun because you get to watch things be built from the ground up. So every day you see the progress you make and you see the physical work, which is exciting to be a part of something like that.
Oh, that's great.
And then my last summer before college, I actually did work for Bayside, and I worked on the basically on the foreman crew. So an assistant to the foreman, going around from job to job site, pretty much just a general labor job. But it taught you different aspects along every single step of the way. So it was all formative. It was all good experience.
Well, that's great because as we tell people here at Career Opportunities, it's not just important to know what you want to do. It's always good to know what you don't want to do. Obviously, painting was a monotonous, detail-oriented chore for you, and other aspects of construction really lit you up and turned you on. So here you are in Charleston, and you're going to college and you're enjoying all this Southern hospitality. You love the city, you love being in the city, and yet something lured you back to Cape Cod. What was that?
Well, a couple things. One, I always, considered myself, for whatever reason, I always knew I was come back home. Not necessarily Cape Cod, but I knew I was going to be in Boston or come back to this area. Right. Charleston was great, but at the end of the day, it's a small city, and I wasn't necessarily sure that I wanted to stay there and try and make something happen at that age. I also graduated college in 2009, so it was at the bottom of the market, and everything was falling apart. So it was not an ideal time to graduate college, but I made the most of it. I ended up coming back home for that summer, and me and 3 friends just decided, let's just go rent a place in Boston and try and make something happen, basically. So we all went up there with no jobs, and I just started cold calling every real estate company I could, commercial real estate, retail, anything, just to try and get my foot in the door. And those things didn't end up happening. Real estate was just bottoming out, and nobody knew what was going on at that time. So it was a really tough time. We ended up getting into, or I did anyway, I got into a different sales job for a startup company, transitioned that into a better technology sales company. And after spending, I think, 2 or 3 years in Boston, I decided that I was getting kind of sick of the commute, missed home, and me and my now wife moved back to the Cape, and I started working at Bayside Building, and that was 5 years ago.
Well, that's great. I mean, you've certainly been around so many aspects of the business. Speaking of aspects of the business, one thing that really fascinates me about Bayside is that you identify neighborhoods where certain homes that are 30 plus years old are, shall we say, getting kind of tired and need sprucing up. Do the owners come to you, or do you prospect the people who live in these neighborhoods? How do you go about this?
Talking about older developments done by Bayside, or just older developments in general?
Well, it sounded like older developments in general from what I saw about the company. You've been sprucing up a lot of homes. You've been doing a lot of demos and rebuilds. How does this process start necessarily?
A lot of it from Bayside, I would say, has been developed since the early 80s. Goodwill, reputation, people know us because we've built over 1,500 homes on the Cape.
Right.
So word spreads, started with the subdivisions, started doing higher end stuff as the 90s went on, early 2000s. Now we do a pretty healthy mixture of our subdivision work. We do a lot of multi-million oceanfront houses, and kind of that mid-range for us, which is the $1 million to $1.5 million jobs. We do remodels, but on a lesser scale. The remodels are typically higher end remodels. So we're not doing, let's say you mentioned the older communities that need some refurbishing. Mm-hmm. That's not really Bayside's business model. It just doesn't work for us the way we're set up. We're kind of a lean and mean company that subcontract out a lot of our work. To do that, it's difficult to compete with some of the smaller builders that are doing sidewall roofing, small additions, that type of thing. We work with some of those builders, pretty close ties who do a lot of work for us, so we're more than happy to recommend those builders to customers like that.
So niche marketing has certainly served you well, obviously. Yes. Now, everybody loves to talk about trends. I mean, no matter what you're talking about. So when people talk about construction, you hear things like, starter mansions like they had 15 years ago are gone, and smaller is better, mm-hmm. and cathedral ceilings are going out. They're a waste of energy. Now, how true are these, if you will, they're almost cliches. I mean, how true is that on Cape Cod?
So that's a good question. The high-end money never left. So mm-hmm. the big money is always there, recession or not. That's not going to go anywhere. So we always say, and we've been saying this for the last probably 5 years since I've been here, although things have been improving pretty steadily for those last 5 years, the market between your 650 to $1 million doesn't really exist anymore. It's very, very small. It's hard to do those builds. $1 million mm-hmm. plus, we do a lot of those. 600 and under, we do a lot of those. For whatever reason, that gap there of those people that are spending the 750 range is small.
What do you attribute that to?
I would imagine it has to do something with the economy, the land prices, even the remaining lots that we have left. Like Brian owns probably 10 to 15 lots, let's say, that are an acre. Acres are hard to come by on the Cape. They're typically between $200,000 and $300,000 a piece. Plus, the cost of building on top of that is expensive. Labor, materials have also been going up as the economy has been going up. So it's hard to keep the cost down, and it's something we fight on a day-to-day basis to try and make housing as affordable as possible to meet our market. Having said that, it's kind of an unknown question is, I don't know if it's just the Cape on that range, 700 to a million, but you can ask any realtor as well as builder. They'll probably say the same thing. When you get closer to the city, right. I bet those numbers are being met all the time. But down here, those numbers have kind of disappeared. I think the second home market, the people with the money want what they want and they're willing to pay for it, and $1 million plus doesn't bother them. The people that are more middle class and have worked their whole life and saved can retire comfortably and build a house for 500-600, but they don't want to stretch it into that 800-900 range and risk healthy retirement. I think that's probably got a lot to do with it.
I would think so too. What about the demographic? Have you seen any change in demographics over the years? For instance, are you getting more of the early retiree age group than you used to, or less, or about the same?
Well, just knowing Bayside's past subdivisions and who lived there and stuff, what we do now is definitely targeted towards retirement age. And not even necessarily targeted, that's just who the buyers are. So we build for the buyers, and those are the people that are coming down 55 to 60. Maybe they've built up equity in their house somewhere outside of Boston, around the Northeast, and are either recently retired or retiring in the next 5 years and want to have their Cape house that they're going to live in for the rest of their life.
Right.
So we run into that a lot. Katuah Meadows is a 40B community, which means, long story short, the town of Barnstable, if you want to build a new house, you have to own 2 acres of land.
Really?
So what does that do? It does exactly what everybody's fighting nowadays against, which is skyrocket the cost of living on Cape Cod. So the state steps in and they have what's called a 40B mandate, where it's almost like a give and take. As a developer, we can petition the state to condense the zoning. So we can go down to a 1/4 acre or less, so long as we build X percentage, happens to be 20%, of the houses in Katuah Meadows for the median income in the town of Barnstable. So single mother that makes $5,000, or a married couple with 2 children that makes $75,000, they can go through what's called a lottery process, and they get vetted as far as credit score and job history and all that stuff to make sure that they are going to be responsible homeowners. And in doing so, they're given a house at the median income cost in the town. So it's a great deal for both sides.
Well, that's wonderful, so that this way the Cape doesn't become a classic case of the haves and the have-nots, as so many other communities are. So let's get back now to what brought Nick Bose here. And I mean, you've had plenty of summer jobs in your lifetime. You made money. You acquired skills along the way. So looking back at all this, and you've got quite a history for a young person, what did you learn about yourself in those summer jobs, and how do you feel you grew as a result, not just as a professional, but as a person?
I think it makes you grow sometimes without even realizing it. I mean, you can kind of look back and think about the days, and you start to realize it a little bit more about, maybe you push yourself further than you thought you could push yourself certain jobs. There's certain aspects of what you like, what you don't like, that maybe you wouldn't have realized if you were working in a restaurant or just staying in school or doing whatever you're doing. If you're going to get out there and try new things, try different things and see what you like and what you don't. I think that's probably the most important thing for me. Like, framing was the most exciting job because I like seeing things go from nothing to somewhat finished product. Now I'm doing that on a grander scale, where you're seeing a whole neighborhood get developed as opposed to just a single house. But that was one thing that drew me to the building industry more than anything, and that's when I knew I wanted to try and make a life out of it.
Well, that's fantastic. And certainly there's something very tangible about watching a subdivision grow. And also, you were an example of someone who grew tremendously as a professional and as a person by way of summer employment. So now, through hard work and versatility, you're a thriving young professional here on Cape Cod. So I thank you, Nick Bose of Bayside Building, for being with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
For everyone out there, remember, before you cross that bridge, visit Career Opportunities, the Cape's one-stop career center.